The following story is a work of fiction intended for entertainment purposes only. Names, characters, businesses, places, events, locales, and incidents are either the products of the author's imagination or used in a fictitious manner. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. Have you ever been driving alone at night on a stretch of highway where the streetlights are miles apart and felt the sudden, crushing weight of eyes on the back of your neck? Have you ever glanced at your rearview mirror, not to check traffic, but because your primitive brain screamed that the empty backseat wasn't actually empty? And what would you do if you realized that the thing sitting behind you wasn't a monster or a demon, but just a person? A person who looks normal, smells like rain and old tobacco, and hums along to the radio, except you never picked them up? My name is Thomas, and I've been a rideshare driver in the Denver metro area for 5 years. I drive a dark gray sedan, keep it impeccably clean, and maintain a 4.9-star rating. I drive the night shift, usually starting around 9 p.m. and going until the sun bleaches the sky over the Rockies. I take the drunk college kids home from Lodo. I take the exhausted nurses to their shifts at the medical center, and I take the early morning travelers to DIA. It's a simple job. It pays the rent. It allows me to exist in a bubble of transient intimacy where I am relevant to someone's life for exactly 20 minutes and then I vanish. But I have one rule. I don't chat about it. I don't put it on a sign, but it is the absolute law of my vehicle. I never ever look in the rearview mirror once the ride begins. I use my side mirrors for lane changes. I turn my head to check blind spots, but that rectangular piece of glass in the center of the windshield, I keep it tilted all the way up, aimed at the ceiling of the car. If a passenger asks, I tell them the headlights from trucks behind us hurt my eyes. It's a lie, of course. The truth is that in Colorado, on these long, winding roads that cut through the blackness of the plains or the shadows of the foothills, the rearview mirror is a window you don't want to look through for too long. Because sometimes, it shows you things that the laws of physics say shouldn't be there. It started about 6 months ago. Before that, I was just a normal driver. I liked the mirror. It was my way of connecting. I'd catch the eye of a laughing couple in the back or check on a sleeping passenger. But then came the night of November 14th. It was a Tuesday, quiet, with that biting cold that settles over Denver before the first real snow. The roads were dry but gray with magnesium chloride dust. I got a ping at 2:15 a.m., a pickup from an office park near the tech center. It was a standard corporate building, glass and steel, completely dark except for the security lights in the parking lot. The name on the app was simply Passenger, no photo. That happens sometimes. People value their privacy, or it's a third-party ride booked by a company. I didn't think much of it. I pulled up to the curb. The idle of my engine was the only sound in the world. I waited. 1 minute. 2 minutes. I was about to cancel and collect the fee when the back door opened. I hadn't seen anyone approach the car. I hadn't seen anyone walk out of the building. 1 second the lot was empty, and the next, the heavy thud of the door closing shook the frame. "Good morning," I said, putting on my customer service voice. "Heading to Aurora?" "Yes," a voice said. It was male, soft, and sounded incredibly weary. I signaled and pulled away from the curb. As I merged onto the empty surface streets, I instinctively glanced up at the rearview mirror to check on my passenger. The back seat was empty. I slammed on the brakes. The car skidded slightly on the cold asphalt before coming to a halt in the middle of the lane. I whipped my head around, physically looking into the back seat. There was a man sitting there. He was older, maybe 50, wearing a rumpled gray suit that looked a size too big. He was clutching a leather briefcase on his lap with both hands, his knuckles white. He looked solid. He looked real. He was staring out the window, seemingly unbothered by my sudden stop. "Is everything all right?" he asked, not looking at me. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I looked back at the mirror. Empty. Just the beige fabric of the back seat. I turned my head again. He was there. "Yeah," I managed to choke out. "Yeah, sorry. Thought I saw a coyote ran across the road." "I didn't see anything," the man said. "Please, I need to get home. It's been a very long day." I started driving again, my hands trembling on the wheel. I spent the next 20 minutes in a state of cognitive dissonance that made me feel like I was losing my mind. Every time I physically turned my head, he was there, a tired businessman just wanting to go home. Every time I glanced at the mirror, I was driving an empty car. I dropped him off at a nice suburban house in Aurora. He thanked me, opened the door, and got out. I watched him walk up the driveway. But when I looked in the mirror to reverse, the driveway was empty. I looked out the side window. He was standing on the porch fumbling for his keys. I drove away fast. I didn't sleep for 2 days. I convinced myself it was a hallucination. Sleep deprivation, carbon monoxide leak in the cabin. I got the car checked. It was fine. I took a few days off, slept 12 hours a night. When I went back to work, I told myself it was a one-time thing, a glitch in my brain. But it wasn't. It happened again a week later. A young woman picked up from a bar in Lohi. She was crying softly. In the back seat, she was wiping mascara from her cheeks. In the mirror, the back seat was vacant. Then it happened with an old man I picked up from a hospital. Then a teenager from a skate park. I realized the pattern wasn't about who they were. It was about what they were. They were heavy. They had presence. They opened doors and closed them. They spoke. They paid for the rides through the app. But the mirror didn't lie. The mirror showed the truth. I was ferrying ghosts, or echoes, or something that didn't have a reflection because it didn't fully exist in this layer of reality. Most people would have quit. Maybe I should have. But the money was good. And honestly, the fear began to dull into a sort of morbid curiosity. And then there was the economy. I have debt. I have bills. I couldn't just stop. So, I made the rule. If I don't look in the mirror, they are just passengers. If I don't look in the mirror, I don't have to acknowledge that I'm driving a hearse for the lost souls of Colorado. If I don't look, I can pretend. It worked for months. Until tonight. Tonight is different. The snow is falling heavy, big wet flakes that cling to the windshield and turn the world into a claustrophobic white tunnel. The roads are slick. I shouldn't be driving, but the surge pricing is insane. 3.5x the normal rate. Greed is a powerful motivator, often stronger than fear. I was cruising down I-25, the wipers fighting a losing battle against the storm when the request came in. Pickup, Silas. Location, mile marker 210, northbound shoulder. That's the highway. You don't pick people up on the shoulder of the interstate unless their car broke down. It's dangerous. But I was close and the payout was showing $45 for a 10-minute ride. I saw the figure standing by the guardrail. No car. Just a man standing in the blizzard, wearing a hoodie, thumb out. Not exactly a standard Uber pickup, but the GPS pin was right on top of him. I pulled over, hazard lights flashing amber against the snow. He opened the back door and slid in. A blast of freezing air came with him, smelling of ozone and wet pine. "Thanks," he said. His voice was rough like gravel grinding together. "No problem, Silas," I said, keeping my eyes forward, avoiding the mirror out of habit. "Where are we headed?" "Just drive north," he said. "I'll tell you when to stop." That's not how the app works. I need a destination to put in the GPS, man. Policy. Just drive. The authority in his voice made my stomach drop. This wasn't the usual weary tone of the phantom passengers. This was aggressive. Cold. I merged back onto the highway. The snow was coming down harder now, visibility reduced to maybe 20 feet. I was gripping the wheel so hard my fingers hurt. "You have a rule," Silas said from the darkness behind me. I froze. "What?" "The mirror," he whispered. He was leaning forward. I could feel his breath, cold as the grave, against my ear. "You don't look. You think it keeps you safe. You think if you don't see the truth, it can't hurt you." I kept my eyes glued to the snowy road ahead. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Look at me, Thomas." He knew my name. The app tells them the driver's name, sure. But the way he said it sounded like an accusation. Look in the mirror, Thomas. You need to see this. My heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my sternum. Every instinct I had screamed, don't look. But the urge was growing. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was a compulsion, a physical pull, like a hook in my eye sockets dragging my gaze upward. Why? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Because, Silas said, and I heard the smile in his voice. I'm the only one who casts a reflection. And that terrified me more than anything, because if he did have a reflection, and he was sitting in my car in the middle of a blizzard demanding I drive north into nothingness, then what exactly had I led into my vehicle? I felt my eyes dart up. I couldn't stop them. I looked at the rearview mirror. I looked. The glass of the rearview mirror caught the faint amber glow of the dashboard lights, framing the back seat in a rectangle of dim illumination. And there he was. Silas. He wasn't transparent. He wasn't fading into the upholstery like the weeping woman from Lohi or the silent old man from the hospital. He was vivid, high definition, undeniable. He was leaning forward between the front seats, his face inches from the glass surface. He had pale skin that looked like it had never seen the sun, and dark, recessed eyes that were locked onto mine in the reflection. He was smiling, a tight, lipless expression that didn't reach those dead eyes. See? He whispered, his voice vibrating through the headrest behind me. Flesh and blood, or close enough. I tore my eyes away from the mirror and snapped them back to the windshield, my hands white-knuckling the steering wheel. The car swerved slightly, tires crunching over the packed snow on the shoulder before I corrected it. My heart was doing something dangerous in my chest, a fluttery, panicked rhythm that made me feel lightheaded. "Who are you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady but failing. "What do you want?" "I told you, Thomas. I want to go north." He sat back. I heard the fabric of the seat shift under his weight. A real sound, a physical presence. The ghosts never made the seat creak like that. "And as for who I am, let's just say I'm an admirer of your work." "My work?" "The ferryman service," Silas said casually, as if discussing the weather. "You pick up the strays, the ones who aren't quite ready to leave. You give them a safe space for 20 minutes, a little box of warmth moving through the dark, and you take them nowhere. You just circulate them until they fade. It's a public service, really." I felt a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead despite the heater blasting at my feet. "I don't know what you're talking about. I just drive for the app." "Don't lie to me, Thomas. It insults both of us. You see them, you know they aren't there. That's why you have your little rule. That's why you stare at the ceiling." He chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "But tonight you broke the rule, and once you break a rule, you change the game." The snow outside was intensifying. The world beyond my headlights had ceased to exist. There were no other cars, no street lamps, just the endless, hypnotic swirl of white rushing toward the windshield. We were in a void, suspended in a capsule of metal and glass, hurtling north at 60 miles per hour. I glanced at my phone mounted on the dashboard. The GPS app was open, but the map was glitching. The blue line that usually indicated the route was flickering, rerouting constantly. The estimated arrival time kept jumping. 20 minutes. 4 hours. Recalculating. "Where are we really going, Silas?" I asked. "There's nothing north of here for miles but farmland and the Wyoming border." "There's plenty north of here if you know where to turn," he replied. "Keep driving. I'll let you know when we're close." I considered pulling over, just slamming on the brakes, grabbing the tire iron from under my seat, and forcing him out. I was a big guy. I could handle a passenger. But every time the thought crossed my mind, a wave of paralyzing dread washed over me. It wasn't just fear, it was a biological imperative. The way a mouse freezes when the shadow of a hawk passes over. My instincts were screaming that touching Silas or even stopping the car would be a fatal mistake. "You're wondering if you can kick me out," Silas said, reading my silence perfectly. "I wouldn't recommend it. It's very cold out there, Thomas, and you're the one who invited me in." I accepted a ride request. That's not an invitation. In my book, it is. You opened the door. You said my name. I gripped the wheel tighter. Look, I don't want any trouble. Take my wallet. Take the car. Just let me out. I don't need your money, and I certainly don't need this cheap sedan, he scoffed. I need the driver, the one with the sight. Do you know how rare you are? Most people, when the hollows get in their cars, they just feel a draft. Maybe they get a shiver, turn up the heat. They don't see the suit the man was buried in. They don't hear the weeping. But you see it all. You're a beacon, Thomas. A lighthouse on a dark ocean. I didn't ask for this, I muttered. None of us ask for our gifts, we just survive them. The car hit a patch of black ice. The rear end fishtailed violently to the left. I steered into the skid, adrenaline spiking, correcting the slide just before we hit the median guardrail. The headlights swept across the concrete barrier, illuminating layers of graffiti and snow. When the car straightened out, the atmosphere inside had changed. It felt heavier. The air pressure had dropped, popping my ears. Careful, Silas murmured. We're getting closer. The veil is thin here. I looked at the GPS again. The screen had turned a solid, bright red. No streets, no map, just red. And in the center, in white text where the street name should be, it read, "Turn off the lights." What? I said aloud. Do it, Silas commanded. His voice was no longer soft. It was a bark, sharp and cutting. I can't turn off the headlights. It's a blizzard. I won't be able to see the road. You don't need to see the road, Silas hissed. You need to see what's on the road. Turn off the lights, Thomas, now. There was a force behind his voice that bypassed my logical brain and hot-wired my motor functions. My hand moved on its own, reaching for the dial on the dashboard. I twisted it. Click. Total darkness engulfed us. For a second, I was blind. The afterimage of the high beams burned in my retinas. I slammed my foot on the brake, terrified we were about to careen off the highway. Don't stop, Silas roared. Keep moving, look. I kept my foot hovering over the accelerator, coasting into the black. As my eyes adjusted to the sudden dark, I realized it wasn't pitch black. The snow itself seemed to have a faint phosphorescent quality, glowing with a dull, sickly luminescence. And then I saw them, standing on the highway. Hundreds of them. They lined the shoulders. They stood in the median. Some were walking down the center of the lanes. Figures, shadows, people in hospital gowns, people in torn construction uniforms, teenagers in prom dresses covered in mud, the hollows. The passengers I had spent months trying to ignore, trying not to see in my mirror. They were all here. They weren't looking at us. They were all walking north, trudging through the snow in a silent, massive migration. What is this? I whispered, tears of pure terror pricking my eyes. What is this place? This isn't a place, Thomas, Silas said, his voice dropping back to that satisfied purr. This is the traffic. You only see the ones who manage to hail a ride. The ones who have enough will left to ping your phone. But most of them, they just walk. They walk until they forget who they were. They walk until the cold eats their memories. I steered the car carefully through the crowd of ghosts. My bumper passed through the torso of a man in a 1940s suit like he was made of mist. I shuddered, feeling a physical drop in temperature as we passed through him. Turn the lights back on, Silas said. You've seen enough. I flicked the switch. The high beams cut through the night and instantly the crowd vanished. The road was empty again. Just the swirling snow and the black asphalt. But the image was burned into my mind. The sheer volume of them. The silence of their march. Why did you show me that? I asked, my voice trembling. Because, Silas said, leaning forward again, his face appearing in the mirror, smiling that terrible smile. I need you to understand the scale of the problem, and I need you to understand why I need a driver. You want me to pick them up? No, Silas said. I want you to take me to where they are going. I want you to drive me to the source. The GPS is ready now. I looked down at the phone. The red screen was gone. The map was back. But the destination wasn't a city or a town. It was a set of coordinates, deep off the main highway, down a road that I knew for a fact didn't exist on any map of Colorado. Destination, Black Creek Road. ETA, 13 minutes. Turn right in 1 mile, Silas said. And Thomas, don't try to miss the turn. I'd hate for us to have an accident. I drove toward the mile marker Silas had indicated. The GPS was counting down, 0.5 miles, 0.3 miles. My headlights cut through the swirling white chaos, illuminating nothing but the metal guardrail on the right and the endless, oppressive dark beyond it. There was no exit here, no service road, just a steep embankment that dropped off into a drainage ditch filled with scrub oak and frozen trash. "There is no road," I said, my voice tight. "It's just a guardrail, Silas. If I turn here, we crash." "Trust the map," Silas murmured. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking out the window, his head cocked like a dog listening to a high-pitched whistle. "The road opens for those who are invited. 0.1 miles. "I'm not doing it," I said, lifting my foot off the gas. The car began to decelerate. "I'm not driving us off a cliff." "Don't slow down," Silas snapped, his hand shooting forward to grip my shoulder. His touch burned. It wasn't hot, it was freezing, a dry ice burn that seared through my jacket and into the muscle. "Speed is the key. You have to hit the threshold with momentum. Drive, Thomas." The pain in my shoulder was blinding. I gasped, and in my panic my foot slammed back down on the accelerator. The engine roared, the RPM spiking. The guardrail rushed toward us at 60 miles per hour. "Turn!" he screamed. I yanked the wheel to the right. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the impact, for the screech of metal on metal, the shattering glass, the tumble into the dark. But there was no impact. There was a sensation of pressure, like being pushed deep underwater, followed by a sudden violent pop in my ears. The roar of the wind died instantly. The hum of the tires on asphalt changed to the crunch of gravel. I opened my eyes. We were no longer on I-25. We weren't even in the storm anymore. The blizzard had vanished as if someone had flipped a switch. The sky above was a bruised purple, completely cloudless but devoid of stars. A massive pale moon hung low on the horizon, too large and too yellow, casting long, sickly shadows across the landscape. We were driving down a single-lane dirt road lined with tall, dead trees. Their branches were white and leafless, interlocking above the road to form a skeletal tunnel. There was no snow here. The ground was dry, cracked earth, kicking up dust that swirled in the red glow of my taillights. "Welcome to Black Creek Road," Silas said softly. He released my shoulder. The pain lingered, a dull throb. "Where are we?" I breathed. I slowed the car to a crawl. The silence outside was absolute. No wind, no crickets, no distant highway hum, just the sound of my engine, which sounded tinny and small in this vast emptiness. "A tributary," Silas said. "You saw the river on the highway, the main flow of souls heading north. This is an eddy, a side channel, a place where things get stuck." "Why are we here?" "Because I lost something here," Silas said. "A long time ago. And I can't move on until I retrieve it." I looked at the rearview mirror. I couldn't help it now. The taboo was broken. Silas looked older in this light. The gray suit seemed frayed, covered in dust. His face was gaunt, the skin pulling tight over his cheekbones. He looked less like a businessman and more like a corpse that had been dried in the sun. "What did you lose?" I asked. "My way," he answered cryptically. "Keep driving. We need to reach the bridge." I pressed the gas, guiding the sedan deeper into the tunnel of trees. My GPS screen was black now, save for a single word in the center: proceed. As we drove, the scenery began to change in subtle, disturbing ways. The trees weren't just trees. In the periphery of my headlights, the knots in the wood looked like faces. Twisted, screaming mouths stretched vertically in the bark. The branches didn't just sway. They seemed to reach, twitching toward the roof of the cars we passed. And then I saw the cars. They were parked off to the sides of the road, nestled among the trunks of the dead trees. Old cars, a rusted-out pickup from the 50s, a station wagon with moss growing over the dashboard, a modern luxury SUV that looked like it had been crushed by a giant hand. They were empty, all of them. Other drivers? I asked, a lump forming in my throat. Other attempts, Silas corrected. Not everyone has your talent, Thomas. Some people get here and panic. They try to turn around, they try to leave before the toll is paid. The road doesn't like that. What happens if you try to turn around? The road stretches, Silas said. It becomes a loop. You drive for hours, days, watching the gas gauge drop until the engine dies. And then, the woods wake up. I gripped the wheel until my knuckles cracked. I'm not stopping. I'm taking you to the bridge, and then I'm leaving. That is the agreement. Silas nodded. We drove for another 10 minutes in silence. The atmosphere in the car was growing heavy again, that pressurized feeling returning. I felt watched, not just by Silas, but by the woods themselves. Then, up ahead, my headlights caught something reflective. It was another car parked sideways across the road, blocking our path. It wasn't rusted or crushed. It looked pristine. It was a dark gray sedan. A Toyota Camry. My car. My breath hitched. That's a Camry. Drive closer, Silas ordered. I inched forward. The license plate came into view. CO 882XLT. I slammed on the brakes. The car skidded to a halt 20 feet from the obstruction. That's my plate, I whispered. The blood drained from my face, leaving me dizzy. That's my car. That's this car. I stared at the vehicle blocking the road. It was identical in every way, down to the small dent on the rear bumper where I'd backed into a fire hydrant 2 years ago. But the driver's side door was open, and inside, the interior light was on. I could see someone sitting in the driver's seat, slumped over the wheel. Silas, I said, my voice rising in panic. What is this? Is that me? Time works differently here, Silas said calmly. Echoes overlap. Possibilities bleed into one another. You're looking at a potential future, one where you stopped. I didn't stop, I'm right here. Are you? Silas leaned forward, his face appearing between the front seats again. Look closer, Thomas. I didn't want to. God, I didn't want to. But I squinted through the windshield, the figure in the other car. He was wearing my jacket. He had my haircut. And the windshield of that car, it was shattered, broken from the inside out. He tried to turn around, Silas whispered. He panicked. He tried to reverse and he hit a tree, and then they came for him. Who? The residents. Suddenly, the headlights of the other car flickered. Then they turned on, blindingly bright, aimed right at us. The horn started blaring, a continuous, deafening drone that cut through the silence of the woods. Honk. Move around it, Silas shouted, his composure breaking for the first time. Don't let it stall you, it's a trap. Drive around. There's no room, I yelled back, shielding my eyes from the glare. The trees were tight against the road edges. Make room. I shifted into drive. I cranked the wheel hard to the left, aiming for the gap between the duplicate car's bumper and a massive, rotting oak tree. I floored it. My car surged forward. The side mirror scraped against the bark of the tree with a sickening screech snapping off. The other side ground against the bumper of the doppelganger car. Metal screamed against metal. As we squeezed past, I looked into the open door of the other car. The driver lifted his head from the steering wheel. It was me. But his eyes were gone. Just black, empty sockets leaking a thick, dark fluid. And his mouth was open in a silent scream. He reached out a hand toward me. I screamed and stomped on the gas. My car broke free from the pinch point, fishtailing in the dirt, spraying gravel as I sped away into the darkness. The horn faded behind us. The light from the duplicate car vanished around a bend. I was hyperventilating. My chest felt like it was caved in. I saw myself. I saw myself dead. You saw a possibility. Silas said. He sounded breathless too, shaken. A warning, we are close now. The bridge is just ahead. Keep your eyes on the road, Thomas. Whatever you hear, whatever you see, do not stop again. The trees were thinning out, but ahead, the road ended abruptly at a wooden structure. An old covered bridge, painted a peeling faded red, spanning a chasm that was too dark to see the bottom of. Stop here, Silas said. I stopped. The car idled rough, the engine making a knocking sound that hadn't been there before. We walk from here, Silas said. What? I whipped my head around. No way. The deal was, I drive you. The car cannot cross the bridge, Silas said, reaching for the door handle. Its weight limit is spiritual, not physical. Too much baggage in this machine. We have to walk. I'm not getting out, I said, locking the doors. I'm turning around. Silas stopped. He looked at me and his eyes were sad. Truly sad. If you turn around now, Thomas, you will run into the car we just passed. And this time, you won't be the one driving away. You are part of the loop now. The only way out is across. He opened his door. The lock didn't stop him. The mechanism didn't even click. He stepped out into the dry dust. Coming? He asked. I looked at the dark tunnel of trees behind me. I imagined the eyeless version of myself waiting there, hungry and angry. I looked at the bridge. It smelled of rot and stagnant water. I turned off the engine. I opened my door. Stepping out of the car felt like stepping out of a submarine and onto the ocean floor. The pressure was immediate. The air wasn't just cold, it was thick, tasting of copper and stagnant water. I locked the car door manually, a useless gesture. If the things in these woods wanted in, a pane of glass and a lock button wouldn't stop them. But it was a human habit, a small ritual of ownership that made me feel slightly less naked in the dark. Silas was already standing at the entrance of the bridge. The structure was ancient, a wooden tunnel with a peaked roof, the red paint peeling away to reveal gray, rot-infested timber underneath. It loomed over the chasm, swallowing the road. "What is this place?" I asked, my voice barely carrying in the dead air. "A crossing," Silas said without turning. He was staring into the black maw of the bridge. "In life, we build bridges to get over obstacles. Rivers, valleys. Here, bridges are built to get over regrets. The deeper the chasm, the deeper the regret." He took a step forward, and the wood groaned under his dress shoe. It wasn't a creak. It was a sound like a bone snapping. "Stay close to me, Thomas, and whatever you do, don't look over the railing." We walked into the darkness. The transition was instant. The moment we passed under the roof, the silence of the woods was replaced by a low, throbbing hum. It sounded like a choir of people humming a discordant note with their mouths taped shut. My footsteps echoed loudly on the planks. Thud, thud, thud. Silas walked silently, his form gliding more than stepping. "You said you lost something," I whispered. The acoustics of the bridge amplified my whisper into a hiss. "I didn't lose a wallet or a watch, Thomas," Silas said, his voice echoing from everywhere at once. "I lost a moment, a singular point in time." He stopped walking. We were in the middle of the bridge now. It was pitch black save for the faint moonlight filtering through the gaps in the wall planks, creating slice-like patterns on the floor. Silas turned to me. His face was illuminated by one of those slivers of moonlight. He looked terrified. "I was a driver too, you know," he said. I blinked. "You drove for an app?" "No, I drove for myself. I was a salesman, regional manager. I spent 40 years on the road. I knew every highway, every motel, every diner from here to Salt Lake City. I lived in my car. It was my kingdom." He looked down at his hands, which were trembling. "My daughter. Her name was Emily. She lived in Boulder. I was in Colorado Springs. She called me. It was a Tuesday. She said she needed me. She was crying. Said she was in trouble. Bad trouble. The humming noise in the bridge grew louder. The floorboards beneath us began to vibrate. I told her I had a meeting, Silas whispered. A crucial meeting. I told her I'd be there in 3 hours, after the deal closed. I felt a cold wind brush past my ankle, though the air was still. I closed the deal, Silas continued, his voice cracking. I got in my car. I drove north. I was making good time. But then, I got tired. Just for a second. I closed my eyes on I-25. Just for a blink, he looked up at me, his eyes vast and empty. I woke up on the side of the road. My car was fine, I was fine. I thought I'd just dozed off and pulled over. So I kept driving. I drove to her house. But when I got there, it was empty. Not just empty. Abandoned. Weeds in the yard. Boarded windows. How? I asked. Because I didn't wake up, Thomas. I died in that crash. I died instantly. But I didn't know it. I was so focused on getting to her, so obsessed with my schedule, that my will overrode the reality of my death. I kept driving, a ghost in a ghost car. The humming spiked into a shriek, then settled back down. I've been driving that highway for 10 years, Silas said. Trying to get to Boulder. Trying to get to that Tuesday, but every time I get to the exit, the road loops. It sends me back. Because I missed the moment. I chose the meeting, and the road won't let me forget it. So why are we here, I asked. Why this bridge? Because this is where the timeline split, Silas said. This isn't just a bridge over a ravine. This spans the gap between what I did and what I should have done. I can't cross it alone. I've tried. Every time I try, the weight pulls me down. He pointed to the floor. I looked down. Shadows were seeping up between the planks. Not normal shadows. These were thick, viscous, like black tar bubbling up from below. They were wrapping around Silas's ankles. It's heavy, Thomas, he gasped. He looked like he was carrying a boulder on his shoulders. His knees buckled. The guilt. It's so heavy. The tar-like shadows began to rise, clawing at his legs, pulling him down. Help me, Silas wheezed. You have the sight, you're alive, you have mass. You can anchor me. I hesitated. The instinct to run was overwhelming. This wasn't my burden. This wasn't my grief. But then I looked at his face. It wasn't the face of a monster anymore. It was the face of a father who had made a mistake he had been paying for, over and over, for a decade. I stepped forward. I reached out and grabbed his arm. The cold was intense. It felt like grabbing a block of dry ice. The shock of it traveled up my arm and slammed into my chest. Move, I yelled, pulling him. He was incredibly heavy. It felt like trying to drag a statue. The black shadows hissed as I pulled him, stretching like gum before snapping. I can't, Silas cried. She's down there. I can hear her. I stopped pulling and looked at him. She's not down there, Silas. That's the regret. That's the echo. Your daughter isn't in the ditch. She needed me. And you're late, I shouted, my voice booming in the enclosed space. You're 10 years late. You can't fix the Tuesday. You have to let the Tuesday go. The bridge shook violently. Dust rained down from the rafters. The humming sound became a roar. You chose the meeting, a voice boomed. It wasn't Silas. It was the wood itself. You chose the money. I know, Silas screamed, tears of black ichor running down his face. I know. Walk. I gritted my teeth, digging my heels into the rotting wood. I leaned back, using my entire body weight to leverage him forward. If you stay here, you become part of the bridge. Is that what you want, to be another plank in this floor? Silas looked at me. The panic in his eyes shifted, replaced by a spark of clarity. He looked at the shadows binding his legs. No, he whispered. He took a step. The shadows tore. He took another. We stumbled forward, an awkward three-legged race against gravity and guilt. The bridge seemed to stretch, the exit moving further away with every step. The noise was deafening now. Screams, car horns, the sound of crashing metal. The sensory overload of a fatal accident playing on a loop. Don't let go, I yelled. I'm trying. We were 10 feet from the end. The moonlight on the other side looked different. Cleaner, blue instead of purple. Suddenly, the floorboard under my right foot gave way. Crack. My leg plunged through the rotten wood up to my hip. I screamed as the jagged timber tore through my jeans and into my skin. I dropped to one knee, my grip on Silas loosening. "Thomas." I looked down. Through the hole in the floor, I could see the bottom of the ravine. It wasn't rocks. It wasn't water. It was faces. Thousands of them. Pale, upturned faces in the dark, mouths open, wailing silently. A river of lost souls flowing beneath us, and they were reaching up. A cold hand clamped around my ankle from below. "Let me go!" I kicked, but the grip was iron. Another hand grabbed my calf. They were pulling me down. "Silas!" I yelled, reaching out with my free hand. Silas was standing on the solid plank ahead of me. He was free of the shadows. He could have walked away. He could have stepped into the blue light and left me to the river. He looked at the exit. Then he looked at me. He dropped to his knees. He reached out, his spectral hands gripping my jacket. "I don't leave people behind," he grunted. "Not anymore." He pulled. The strength in him was unnatural. He wasn't just pulling with muscle, he was pulling with will, with the desperation of a man trying to balance a ledger that had been in the red for too long. I felt the hands on my ankle tear away. I scrambled up, gasping, dragging my bleeding leg out of the hole. We scrambled the last few feet on hands and knees, crossing the threshold of the bridge and collapsing onto the dirt on the other side. The noise stopped instantly. The humming cut off. We lay there for a moment, breathing hard, me panting for oxygen, Silas heaving with a ghostly exertion that shouldn't have been possible. I sat up and looked back. The bridge was silent, just an old, rotting structure in the moonlight. "We made it," I whispered. Silas stood up slowly. He brushed the dust off his suit. He looked different. The lines of exhaustion on his face had smoothed out. The darkness in his eyes had lifted. "Thank you, Thomas," he said softly. "Is this it?" I asked, looking around. We were in a clearing. In the center of the clearing stood a house. It wasn't a scary house. It was a normal suburban two-story home, bathed in the blue moonlight. There was a tricycle in the driveway. A light was on in the kitchen window. "That's her house," Silas said, his voice trembling with a different kind of emotion now. "That's her house from 10 years ago. But she's not there," I said gently. "Silas, this is a memory." "I know." He smiled, a genuine smile. "But it's the only place I want to be. I don't want to change it anymore, I just want to arrive." He walked toward the house. "Wait," I called out. "What about me? How do I get back? My car is on the other side of that bridge." Silas stopped. He turned back to me. "You can't go back across the bridge, Thomas. Once you cross, the toll is paid. The bridge is closed to you. Then how do I get home?" Silas pointed past the house to where the dirt road continued into the trees. "The road continues, but Thomas, you should check your pockets." I frowned. I reached into my jacket pocket. My fingers brushed against something cold and metallic. I pulled it out. It was a set of car keys, but they weren't mine. They were old. A keychain with a faded logo of a rental car company from the 90s. "What is this?" "The ride isn't over," Silas said, fading slightly as he walked toward the front door of the memory house. "You helped a passenger reach their destination. That's the job. But the shift doesn't end just because one ride is done." He reached the door. He didn't open it. He simply stepped through the wood as if it were mist. And then he was gone. I was alone in the clearing. Me, a house that wasn't real, and a set of keys to a car I hadn't seen yet. I turned to look at the road ahead. Parked under the tree line, barely visible in the shadows, was a vehicle. It wasn't my Toyota. It was a vintage black hearse, and the engine was running. I walked toward the hearse. My legs felt like lead, my injury from the bridge throbbing with a dull, rhythmic heat. The clearing behind me, the house, the tricycle, the memory of Silas finding his peace, seemed to fade into the background, becoming as two-dimensional as a painted backdrop. The only thing that felt real, terrifyingly solid, was the long black vehicle idling under the dead trees. It was a 1960s Cadillac Miller Meteor. The chrome bumper caught the blue moonlight, gleaming like a set of bared teeth. The windows were heavily tinted, impenetrable black squares. The engine didn't rumble. It whispered, a low-frequency purr that I felt in my molars rather than heard. I looked down at the keys in my hand. They felt heavy, magnetic, pulling my hand toward the driver's side door. "I'm not doing this," I said aloud. My voice sounded small, swallowed instantly by the forest. "I'm calling for help." I pulled out my phone. 1% battery, no signal. The screen flickered, showing the time. 000. It hadn't changed since I picked up Silas. Time didn't exist here, or at least it didn't move forward. I looked back at the bridge. Silas was right. The wooden structure looked different now. It wasn't just old. It was ancient, petrified. The entrance was blocked by a thick wall of brambles and thorns that seemed to have grown in seconds. There was no way back to my Camry, no way back to the highway. I was stranded in a pocket dimension with a hearse. The driver's side window of the Cadillac rolled down, slowly, smoothly. I jumped back, expecting to see a face. But the cabin was empty. The leather bench seat was pristine, the dashboard polished. A single envelope sat on the driver's seat. I approached cautiously. The smell emanating from the car was distinct, lilies and formaldehyde, the scent of a funeral home. I reached in and took the envelope. It was thick, creamy cardstock. On the front, handwritten in elegant, flowing calligraphy, were the words, "Shift assignment." I opened it. Inside was a single index card. Driver, Thomas vehicle, the Charon route, southbound, the arterial vein. Passenger, collective destination, the reservoir. I stared at the card. The Charon? You've got to be kidding me. The radio in the hearse clicked on. Static at first, then a voice. It wasn't Silas. It was a dispatcher's voice, female, calm, professional, but with an underlying distortion, like she was speaking through a mouthful of water. "Unit 882, do you copy? You are behind schedule. The passenger volume is critical. Proceed to the collection point immediately." "I'm not Unit 882, I shouted at the dashboard. "I'm an Uber driver. I drive a Toyota. Get me out of here." Unit 882, refusal to transport will result in contract termination. Please note that in this jurisdiction, termination is literal. Proceed. The engine revved on its own. The headlights flashed. I looked around the dark woods. The trees were moving again. The knots in the wood were opening like eyes. I could hear rustling in the brush, something large, many-legged, moving toward the clearing. The hearse was the only safety. It was a trap, yes, but it was a cage that would keep the wolves out. I opened the heavy door and slid into the driver's seat. The leather was freezing. The steering wheel was enormous compared to my Camry's. I put the key in the ignition, though the car was already running. The moment I turned the key, the locks engaged with a heavy thud. "Route confirmed," the dispatcher said. "Proceed south." I put the car in drive. The hearse glided forward smoothly, floating over the ruts in the dirt road. The GPS on the dashboard, an old CRT monitor built into the wood paneling, flickered to life. It showed a single glowing line cutting through a chaotic scribbling of darkness. I drove. The road changed. The dirt gave way to cobblestones, then to smooth black glass. The trees fell away, replaced by towering walls of rock that stretched up endlessly on either side. We were in a canyon that felt like a wound in the earth. And then I saw the passengers. They weren't hailing rides this time. They were waiting at bus stops. Every mile or so, there was a solitary bench on the side of the road, and at every bench there was a crowd. "I'm not stopping," I muttered. "I'm not picking up any more ghosts." "Pickup required at stop 4, the radio crackled. "Capacity is available." "No!" I floored the gas. The hearse didn't speed up. It slowed down. The brakes applied themselves. The steering wheel locked. The car pulled itself to the side of the road, right next to a bench where 3 figures sat. The back doors unlocked. I watched in the rearview mirror. I couldn't help it. The rule was gone. The figures stood up. One was a young man with a motorcycle helmet under his arm. The side of his head was caved in. The second was an old woman in a hospital gown dragging an IV pole that rattled against the asphalt. The third was a child, a little girl, maybe 7, holding a wet, dripping teddy bear. They opened the back door. "Room for 3?" the motorcycle guy asked. His voice was muffled, wet. "Yeah," I whispered, defeated. "Get in." They climbed into the back. The space in the rear of the hearse wasn't normal. From the outside, it looked like a standard cargo area for a coffin, but in the mirror, looking back, it looked like the interior of a bus. Rows and rows of seats stretched back into a dark infinity. There were already people back there, hundreds of them. Silent, gray figures sitting in the gloom. Silas had been right. This wasn't just a ride. It was mass transit for the dead. I drove for what felt like hours. I stopped 6 more times. I picked up a soldier with mud on his face, a bride with a torn dress, a man in a diving suit. The weight of the car increased with every stop. The steering became sluggish. The engine groaned. I could feel the collective sadness of the passengers pressing against the back of my neck, a physical coldness that made my teeth chatter. "Where are we going?" the little girl asked from the seat directly behind me. I looked at her in the mirror. She was blue-lipped, shivering. "The reservoir," I said, reading the card. "I don't know what that is, sweetie." "Is it warm there?" she asked. "I'm so cold, the water was so cold." My heart broke. "I hope so. I hope it's warm." The canyon walls began to widen. The road started to slope downward, steep and sharp. The air grew humid. I could smell salt. "Approaching terminus," the dispatcher announced. "Prepare for offloading." We rounded a final bend and the world opened up. We were on a cliff edge. Below us, stretching to a black horizon, was a sea. But it wasn't water. It was a vast, swirling ocean of gray mist, churning and rolling like a storm cloud trapped on the ground. The road ended at a massive stone pier that jutted out over the mist. I pulled the hearse to the end of the pier and put it in park. "Offload," the radio commanded. The back doors popped open. "Everybody out," I said, my voice shaking. "End of the line." They didn't argue. They didn't ask for refunds. They stood up one by one and filed out of the back of the hearse. I watched in the mirror as the infinite rows of seats emptied. They walked to the edge of the pier, and they jumped. They didn't scream. They just stepped off into the mist. As they fell, their forms seemed to dissolve, turning into wisps of white vapor that joined the swirling sea below. They were becoming part of the atmosphere. The little girl was the last one. She stopped at my window. "Thank you, Mr. Driver," she said. "You drive safe." She walked to the edge, hugged her wet bear, and stepped off. I watched her fade. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. It was horrific, but it was also peaceful. They weren't stuck anymore. They weren't walking the highway. They were part of something else. "Manifest complete," the radio said. "Return to base for maintenance." "No," I said. "I'm done. I did your run. I want to go home." "Contract is binding," the voice said. "Return to base." "I quit," I shouted. I grabbed the door handle. It was locked. I pulled the lock pin. It snapped off in my hand. I pounded on the glass. It didn't break. The seatbelt suddenly tightened across my chest. It constricted like a python, pinning me to the seat. "Driver is distressed," the voice noted coldly. "Initiating calm-down protocol." A nozzle extended from the dashboard. A gas, sweet and cloying, sprayed into my face. I coughed, trying to hold my breath, but my lungs burned. I inhaled. My vision blurred. The panic faded, replaced by a dull, warm numbness. My hands relaxed on the wheel. My head lolled back against the headrest. "I want to go home," I slurred. "You are home," the voice soothed. The car is home. The road is home. You are a very good driver, Thomas. We have so many more passengers waiting. The hearse put itself in reverse. We backed away from the pier. The car turned around, facing the canyon road. I looked in the rearview mirror one last time before my eyes grew too heavy to focus. My reflection was changing. My skin was paling. My eyes were sinking into dark sockets. I was starting to look like Silas. "No," I whispered. The car accelerated. The gas hissed into the cabin, a sweet chemical fog that tasted like artificial grapes and old pennies. I fought it for as long as I could, holding my breath until my lungs spasmed. But eventually, biology won. I inhaled. The world didn't go black. It went static. My vision pixelated. The dashboard of the hearse dissolved into white noise. The steering wheel beneath my fingers felt like it was melting, turning from leather and wood into something liquid and cold. I felt my consciousness unspooling, the memories of Thomas, the debt, the lonely apartment, the bad knees, being filed away into a cabinet I could no longer access. I wasn't Thomas anymore. I was the driver. I was a function, a component in a machine much older than the internal combustion engine. Time lost its meaning. I might have driven for minutes. I might have driven for centuries. I remember flashes. I remember a highway made of bones. I remember a sky that was nothing but a giant blinking eye. I remember passengers, so many passengers. Some screamed, some prayed, some sat in stoic silence, clutching photos of loved ones they would never see again. I took them all to the reservoir. I watched them fall. I felt the hollow satisfaction of a job well done, a quota met. But then, a glitch. It came in the form of a sound. Not the dispatcher's watery voice, not the groans of the chassis. A sharp, rhythmic tap, tap, tap. I blinked. The white noise in my head cleared for a microsecond. Tap, tap, tap. Light flooded my vision. Harsh, blinding white light. I gasped, my lungs filling with freezing, clean air. The smell of formaldehyde and lilies vanished, replaced by the scent of pine and diesel exhaust. I was sitting in the driver's seat. My hands were gripping the wheel so tight my fingers were blue. I wasn't in the hearse. I was in my Toyota Camry. The engine was idling. The heater was blasting. The windshield wipers were slapping back and forth, clearing away a layer of fresh snow. Tap, tap, tap. I jerked my head to the left. A flashlight beam was cutting through the glass. A state trooper was standing there, his face obscured by the glare, knocking on my window with a gloved knuckle. I fumbled for the button, rolling down the window. The cold air hit me like a physical blow, shocking my system back into reality. "You okay in there, son?" the trooper asked, breath pluming in the cold. "You've been parked on the shoulder for a while. Conditions are pretty bad to be napping." I stared at him, my mouth opening and closing like a fish. I looked around. I was on I-25. The snow had stopped, but the roads were icy. The mile marker green sign reflected in my headlights, mile marker 210. The same spot where I had picked up Silas. My voice was a wreck, raspy and dry. I think I dozed off. "I'm sorry, officer." The trooper shone the light into the back seat, then back at me. He seemed satisfied that I wasn't drunk, just another exhausted gig worker grinding out a living. "Roads are slick," he said. "Get moving or get to a rest stop. Don't stay on the shoulder. It's not safe." "Yes, sir, thank you." He walked back to his cruiser. I watched him go. I touched the dashboard of my Camry. Plastic. Cheap, hard plastic. I touched my face. Skin. Stubble. Warmth. It was a dream. It had to be. A hallucination brought on by fatigue and the whiteout conditions. I had pulled over to wait out the storm, fell asleep, and my brain had cooked up a nightmare about ghosts and bridges to process the stress. I laughed. It was a weak, shaky sound, but it was real. Jesus, Thomas, get it together. I put the car in drive and merged back onto the highway. The traffic was light. The storm had passed. I checked my phone. The Uber app was open. No rides in the queue. My earnings for the night sat at $145. Everything was normal. I was just a guy driving a car. I drove for 20 minutes, letting the adrenaline fade, listening to the radio. A classic rock station was playing Don't Fear the Reaper. A little on the nose, I thought, but I hummed along, feeling the tension leave my shoulders. I was safe. I was alive. I was going to go home, sleep for a week, and maybe start looking for a data entry job. Something boring. Something day shift. My phone pinged. A ride request. I instinctively reached out to decline it. I was done for the night. I was done forever. But my finger hovered over the screen. Passenger. Emily. Location. 4 miles ahead. Rating. 5.0. Emily. The name sent a jolt of electricity down my spine. Silas's daughter. Coincidence, I told myself. Emily is a common name. There are thousands of Emilys in Colorado. But then I saw the destination. Destination, the bridge. My blood ran cold. The cabin of the Camry suddenly felt very small. It's a glitch, I thought. A prank. Or maybe just a local landmark I don't know about. I hit decline. The app didn't respond. The spinning circle just kept spinning. I hit it again, harder. The screen flickered. The familiar Uber interface, the map, the little car icon, the white background, inverted. The colors flipped. The background went black. The text turned a sickly, glowing red. Acceptance mandatory. The words flashed on the screen, pulsing like a heartbeat. No, I whispered. I grabbed the phone to throw it out the window, but my hand wouldn't open. My fingers were locked around the device. I tried to use my other hand to pry them loose, but my left arm was stuck to the steering wheel. A sound came from the radio. The music had stopped. Unit 882, the watery voice said, clear as a bell through the Camry speakers. We noticed you tried to resign. I'm afraid the severance package was rejected. I'm awake, I screamed at the dashboard. The cop saw me. I'm real. I'm in my car. You are in your vehicle, the voice agreed. But look at the odometer, Thomas. I looked down at the dashboard. The odometer didn't show numbers. It showed symbols, infinity loops. I looked at the gas gauge. It was full. It had been at a quarter tank when I stopped. But the fuel needle wasn't pointing to F. It was pointing to a symbol that looked like a skull. You crossed the bridge, the voice purred. You paid the toll. You brought Silas home. You proved you have the capacity. The Karen was just a loaner. But you're an owner-operator now. My phone screen changed. The GPS route locked in. Pickup in 3 minutes. I felt my foot press down on the accelerator. I wasn't doing it. My leg was moving on its own, guided by a muscle memory that wasn't mine. No, please, I begged. I just want to go home. You are home, the voice said. The road is home. I was crying now, hot tears blurring my vision. I didn't want this. I didn't want to be the ferryman. I didn't want to see the hollows. I have a rule, I whispered, a desperate mantra. I don't look in the mirror. I don't look in the mirror. Oh, Thomas, the voice chuckled. That rule is expired. Check your blind spot. I didn't want to. I fought it with every ounce of will I had left, but my neck muscles engaged. My head turned. I looked up at the rearview mirror. The back seat was empty, but the reflection of the driver, it wasn't me. The face in the mirror was pale, the skin pulled tight over sharp cheekbones. The eyes were dark pools of endless, ancient ink, and the mouth was smiling, a tight, lipless smile that stretched too wide. It was Silas's face. No, it was my face. But it was worn down, eroded by the wind of 1,000 years of driving. The lips in the mirror moved, but I didn't speak. Shift start, my reflection said. I watched my own hand reach up and adjust the mirror, angling it down perfectly so I could see the entire back seat. The rule was broken. The rule was gone. I saw the exit coming up. I signaled. I merged. I drove toward the darkness. So, that's my story. That's why I'm posting this here in the comments section of a video I'll never watch, using a phone that shouldn't have a signal. I'm still driving. I'm always driving. Sometimes I'm in a Camry, sometimes a Civic, sometimes a hearse. But I'm always there, lurking in the app, waiting for the surge pricing of the soul. If you're out late tonight in Denver and you need a ride, check the driver's rating, check the license plate, and for the love of God, look at the driver's eyes before you get in. If they look tired, tip them well. But if they look like they're looking through you, cancel the ride. Run. Walk home in the snow if you have to. Because if you get in my car, I can't promise I'll take you where you want to go. I can only take you where you need to go. And the meter is running. Click that subscribe button if you want to stay on the curb. Leave a comment if you've ever seen a car on the highway that looked empty even though it was moving. And share this story with your friends. It might save them a fare they can't afford to pay. My passenger is here. She looks cold. Drive safe.